Hello, this is Illia Hart, and I'm here with Guy Armstrong. We're going to talk about body electronics again today. This is, now we could call this a series, Guy, because this is number 4 that we have completed.
That's cool.
Yeah. So before we started to record, we were speaking about the different levels of body electronics. There are progressions, of course, as there is in everything, but there's definite progressions within body electronics. So, Guy, would you like to speak a little bit on that, about how you started out and the progressive way that that you experienced it?
Okay, sure thing. Thank you. So I got into body electronics around 1996 when I was sort of 16, 17, I think, yeah, around that time. And this is like a really full-on kind of, well, it's a really good quality healing modality. So it's nutritional stuff and emotional stuff, and it sort of deals with your body in terms of what it used to be called the science of bodily regeneration. So
we can still use that.
Yeah, we can still. It's definitely appropriate. So I got into it, and I think that year 1996 or so I had an eye reading, and there were a few health problems that I had back then. Obviously didn't have the best eyesight, and I had a problem where I'd get tired in the afternoons, which I think is a pancreatic problem. And I had the other obvious one was anemia in the extremities, which is a kind of numbness in the sort of hands and feet, or maybe a coldness, a lack of nerve supply. So anyway, my friends and I started a point holding group, and that would have been around 1998 or so. And we had a good couple of years consistent efforts in this point holding group, and that sort of came to an end around maybe 2000 or 1999, around the end there. And I got the most out of the emotional aspects of the work. Before getting involved in point holding, I was quite a wild kind of kid. I didn't have much emotional discipline. I couldn't study well at school. Well, I could, but I was just kind of lazy and indulgent and sort of didn't want to do it. And I was just very sort of governed by my emotions. And I got into reading the logic and sequence books. And at the time I was working at McDonald's, and just as a general sort of crew member kind of person, just doing equipment maintenance and flipping burgers and stuff like that, cleaning up the grease and all this kind of work. And I really was motivated by that first logic and sequence book by Dr. Ray, where he sort of talks about, I don't know how you'd frame it. I think I'd just say he talks about being a good person, or a person of virtue, and there's lots of different chapters on that. There's a chapter in that book on commitment. There's a chapter on the 10 steps to perfection. There's a chapter on the list, which is about sort of getting your life in order. Anyway, I really took that book to heart and applied it as best I could, through my own myriad weaknesses and so on. And that was really, really beautiful time of my life, I think, just during that whole 2 years of point holding in a group. And we eventually stopped this group for all kinds of various reasons, but looking back, it's sort of, I do have the odd bit of regret, that it possibly could have kept going, but I don't know, it's getting into all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas and so on. Anyway, I had a bit of a break from point holding for maybe 4 or 5 years, where I did it occasionally, but not with heaps of dedication. And then around 2006, I think, I started getting a bit more dedicated towards it, and I met up with Graham Bennett, who's a instructor from Auckland, New Zealand. I was in Wellington, still am. It's about 600 kilometres south of Auckland. Anyway, Graham wrote this book called The List, which is about chapter 11 of book 1 in the Logic and Sequence series, and I bought that around 2009, and I was quite motivated by that because I'd never really properly dedicated myself to the list, and I think a lot of I think my life would have been very different if I'd been more dedicated to the list in 2008 or 9, or sorry, 1998 or 1999 or whatever, when we had the point holding group. I say I sort of took the Logic and Sequence book to heart, and I kind of did, but even in saying that, I think I still felt quite justified in not doing the list, which, at the time it just seemed kind of normal. It just seemed kind of fine. Like, I know I'd do it later, or yeah, sure, it's important, but we'll do it another time. And yeah, this has sort of become one of the big lessons, I think, in life, that it's so easy to justify maybe self-destructive things, even though it's not really self-destructive, like smoking and being an alcoholic is self-destructive, but just I think we can also be self-destructive in what we don't do. So I'd really encourage anyone and everyone listening to this to, even if you don't know what you're doing, just go for it and use the list. It's really, really powerful. When I started using that in 2009, 2009 or so, it was kind of like it got worse before it got better. It sort of, there's a little healing crisis in there, so to speak, partly because you write down on the list all your goals, responsibilities, desires, and so on, but you've got to sort of look at each one contemplatively and honestly and judge, to the best of your ability. Is this going to be uplifting for me? Is this going to be freeing for me? If this is a commitment or something that I want, can I accurately and, enthusiastically and lovingly deal with it in a manner that's uplifting for not only myself, but everyone involved? Anyway, so I continued doing a bit of point holding throughout the years. I was still in touch with a man from the point holding group that we had. His name's Mike. He's a really good bloke, very, very dedicated to his nutrition and stuff like that. So him and I would get together every once in a while, and we'd have a bit of point holding here and there. And around it was 2010 that I first met with you, Illia, and I went to Arizona, and we had a beautiful week-long intensive there, and that was kind of a big, what would you call it? I don't know. Put up the intensity of the point holding practice. After that event, I came back to Wellington, and I remember I was working in this laboratory, and Wellington's quite a cold city in the winter, and so I would have come back around June, May or June, I think, and that was around the start of winter. And I remember after this point holding group, it was just like, even though I was working in this cold, sort of grey, damp laboratory, it was just like colours were brighter, and the memories of that point holding group were really prescient and powerful and vibrant and so on. And I just felt like I'd sort of come out of a level of unconsciousness, if that makes sense. And I got a couple of really good friends during that work while I was working at that place, and I remember having a heck of a lot of fun and sort of spontaneous laughter and, really relaxed enthusiasm and enjoyment with them. That was really cool. And then 2012, went to another one of your intensives, Illia, in Petrolia. It's north of Detroit. Yeah, a couple of hours drive north of Detroit. Yeah.
Or Canadian, so I would say like 3 hours south of Toronto, on near the shores of Lake Huron.
Okay. Yeah, and that was a really good one as well. And then came back to New Zealand, and I think my next overseas trip I went to Vietnam. So I still kept on, point holding here and there, but I didn't. I'm sure you would have done some more intensives, Illia, around that time, but I didn't go to one until 2015. And that was, I think it was February or March in 2015. And that was a week at Salt Spring Island. And that was really beautiful. And we had some really good point holdings there. I remember Rose held my one of the points around my back and my hips there. And after that, I sort of got up and it was taller and my skin was pinker and, more sort of glowing and golden and so on. Anyway, I'd done various jobs over the years, and I was back working at McDonald's and from around 2012 or 2013 onwards, and I became friends with a guy there, and we sort of hung out a lot, and just thinking about what I shouldn't say on camera, but anyway, after this 2015 point holding intensive, I came back to Wellington, and I had a couple of weeks kind of good healing crisis after the point holding. The healing crisis can sort of continue post point holding, the
As it does.
body electronics. Yeah, it involves the the preparation, put you into healing crisis, and then the point holding itself really power that through. And then after the point holding, you've really got to be on your toes. Like I remember Illia talking about in 2012, I always remember you saying after you came back from the visualization and consciousness work, which is like a few steps above sort of normal holding and intensity and dedication, after you came back from that, you would spend like hours just dealing with the sort of emotional things that you were digging up and transmuting, and you'd have to be really active in I hope it's okay if I sort of mention that, but yeah, it just gives you a bit of an idea of how you can really there's a lot in our minds that we can sort of dig up and deal with. Anyway, after the 2015 intensive, I had a really good couple of weeks healing crisis, and then it just kind of died off, and I felt really strange about it, and it just didn't feel right. I couldn't put it into words very well. But anyway, I thought, I've been doing point holding for so long, and this was really sort of weird, because the 3 times that I'd been to Illia's intensives, I'd had really good, powerful healing crises, and then after this one, I hadn't so much. It was just like it just numbed a bit, and I couldn't think what was wrong. I hadn't started smoking dope or anything. I wasn't on any painkillers. I always kept away from the pharmaceutical drugs, except unless I had a real bad emergency or something. So I didn't know what was wrong. And I know Illia hadn't changed, she was still, dedicated to, she was still facilitating just as well, or possibly even better than always, so nothing had changed in how we did the point holding or anything. Anyway, long story short, I sort of thought, well, I always wanted to do cranial electronics, right? And so just so you know, we start point holding with, work on the nervous system points right at the back of the head, and then from then on, you're usually onto the heart points by your chest or foot points. So you can, we're into reflexology, so you can sort of access any part of the body via the.
Goes from nerve supply and circulation into the endocrine points. like from the endocrine points to the spinal points, and then from the spinal points into organ points. And then from there, you can jump forward into what you were saying, Guy, the cranial.
Yeah.
I want to mention here too that I'll just insert this so people understand that cranial electronics is actually a part of the instructor's course. So yeah, so I'll just put that out there. It's not actually part of the regular point holding. It means that you're literally taking a huge leap into greater responsibility and yeah, in a much deeper commitment to yourself. So yeah, just wanted to interject that.
Yeah, I'd second that. Yeah, so I got in touch with Graham Bennett again and said, hey, will you hold my cranial points? And he said, well, I've hurt my finger, give me a call in a month or two. So I called him up in a month or so, and I think it was around August of 2015 or so, maybe July, that I had the first part of my cranial points held. And I want to say something about attitude here. So there's a bit in Doug Morrison's book where he talks about desiring healing, but being totally willing to not get the healing. And this is one of the sort of requirements, or one of the laws involved in getting what you want or achieving healing. So we're willing to put all our efforts into healing, but we're also not really emotionally attached to whether we get that healing or not. And that's partly because if we're resisting not healing, we're going to create not healing. There's heaps that's been said on that in the PE literature and on videos. But anyway, I thought at this time, I'll put all my efforts into cranial work, I'll prayer and preparation and nutritional stuff and so on, and then I'll go and have the cranial points held. And if nothing happens, if I don't get any benefit, then I'll just forget about point holding, or I'll just give it up for a while, and maybe I'll come back in 10 years or whatever, because I was just I was quite kind of depressed around that time, and I didn't know why. And I kind of, looking back, I didn't want to know why. But if you'd asked me back then, hey, do you want to know why you're kind of depressed? I probably would have said, oh, I'm not depressed or something. I would have been in denial of it. I think maybe not completely, but I was really denying it. Anyway, when I had the first part of the point holding done, I went through a lot of unconsciousness and numbness, and then a month or so later, we did the next part of the point holding. And so you do both sides. I've always been a very passive and sort of receptive, open, patient kind of person, and I've often not really been an outgoing, demanding, dominating, controlling kind of person. I was always far more willing to be controlled than willing to control. So if I had a situation at work or something where I was in charge and had to delegate or confront people and say, hey, you did this really badly, I always found that really difficult. But if it was someone telling me what to do, I was generally easygoing with that, as long as they treated me with respect and stuff. Anyway, when we did the left side of the cranial point holding, that was just like textbook point holding. So Graham pushed on the points, and I just went through the feeling, through the scale of emotions once or twice or whatever, with word patterns and so on, and I held my body totally still, and that was just like perfect point holding. And I was kind of surprised at how that was easy that was on the left side. And then he got to the right side, and I screamed like a baby. I couldn't, you know, it was like really, really difficult for me to hold my body still, for me to love the pain, and for me to sort of let the emotions come up and feel the feelings and so on. And that really showed me how, you know, that was a really, really powerful example. You know, John Ray said something like signs follow those who believe, or whatever. And this was just really, really powerful in showing me that, you know, the mind and the body are so just massively linked, where, you know, you can have this incredible pain on one side of the body and just go through it lovingly and it's fine and so on, and similar pain on the other side is just so unbelievably difficult. And, you know, he at one point he couldn't quite get his finger onto the point for about half an hour or so.
Which point was that, Guy?
The one in here.
The inside of the mouth?
Yeah,
Okay.
the one inside the mouth. Yeah.
Goes up to touches the sphenoid bone is what we're.
Yeah, and that one was, when I had that point done, it was like, there was a point where it was like needles shooting through my eyeballs, like vertically, like just re-experienced that kind of sensation, you know. I don't want to put you off, but
Hey, tell it like it is.
Yeah, tell it like it is. But yeah, that was just really, really incredible. And I could feel all these muscle attachments in my face just changing and shifting and stuff. And yeah, it was really, really cool. It was absolutely, you know, I feel, I don't know if there's a God or whatever, but, you know, if there's a God, I feel, you know, I feel blessed in saying, you know, and being able to have that experience, you know, it's really like that. It's just, there's just even the physical aspects of it, you know. I mean, I was coming right out of level 7, you know. I didn't have spiritual experiences as a young kid or anything. I had a pretty good intuition and I was pretty creative, but I was still pretty kind of numb in many ways. But yeah, it was super, super cool having
And so how did you experience that after, like following the cranial? How were the days in which it followed?
I'm a little reluctant to be completely honest, but you know, just because it was just a total shift in many ways. But well, I'll just tell you what happened. So I got back from this point holding, and my friends, I was living in a hostel with sort of 15 other people or whatever, really big house and everything. I was the manager there, and one of my friends saw me in the kitchen maybe a day or two after that point holding, and or anyway, I should say, you know, we completed this point. It took about half an hour for Graham to get through. You know, my muscles there were all knotted up and tense, and so he, you know, persevered for half an hour, and then I screamed for half an hour or whatever, and then it was okay, just plain sailing. But anyway, I was in the kitchen at home one day, and there were a couple of guys in the kitchen with me, and I knew them both pretty well. One of them I knew really well, and the other I didn't. I know we were friends, but you know, he was a tenant there. And they looked at me and said, "Hey, bro, what happened to your face?" And I just sort of thought, well, what should I say? What should I say? You know, and I just said, "Oh, yeah, smile too much or something." And this other fella said, look like you've got little boy face. You know, he was from India. They were both from India actually, and yeah, it was kind of memorable, because it's like, it's not just all in my head or anything. It really was a really cool kind of, I don't know, makes you younger, I suppose. Science of bodily regeneration. Yeah. Anyway,
that brings back a little memory I had. I don't know if it was my first cranial, but it was, I think in the early year. No, it wouldn't be my first cranial, but it was following a cranial, and I usually drove from southwestern Ontario to New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, where Doug would give the intensives. And this time, though, for some reason, I drove because I was the chief cook and bottle washer, so I was doing the cooking, and Doug was doing the shopping. He would go to the local health food store. I'd give him a list every day, and we worked in tandem to provide 3 meals a day for the participants, which was quite a feat when I look back on it now. And because sometimes there was close to 50 people. And so in this one that you're reminding me, I'm getting a memory, is I was flying back. I hadn't driven that time. And I would drive because I took all my pots and pans and my herbs and my everything. I had, my van loaded right to the ceiling. And this time when I was flying back on the plane, the sutures, which hold the plates of the cranium, together, they're much like the earth in the sense of fault lines, and they're held together by what we call sutures. And I had recognized that I had like some intense shifts of these plates during that cranial. And when I got on, like we're up in the air, and all of a sudden inside my head, just like at these sutures, my whole cranium started to pop, and it was popping like popcorn, and I could hear it like inside my head, and it was like, wow, like I just had to sit there in the plane and go through it. And right as soon as I got home, I messaged Doug and was telling him about it. And it was pretty exciting stuff. But what happened, like my entire structure of my head and ultimately my face shifted. So I had a very round face. If you look at pictures of me like 20 years ago or more, I had this very, very round face. And suddenly it became, it was just an entire restructuring. Yeah, I had many cranials after that as well, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So was your,
yeah, go ahead.
can I ask, was your first one the most difficult, or was the last one?
No, that's a great question, because there wasn't any rhyme or reason to it. I had 7 cranials, and I gave 7 cranials.
Wow.
And in my opinion, actually giving a cranial is more intense than receiving it. Yeah. It's an extremely difficult set of points to hold. Yeah, so there's actually like 3 main points on either side. So the cranial makes up 6 major points, and each one of them take 2 or 3 hours, just to give people an idea, how much effort is involved. But both giving and receiving, there wasn't a rhyme or reason, like a progression. You'd think in some ways you might think that there's like a progression of consciousness, but that's not how I experienced it. And for many others too, I know this is the same experience, where when they had multiple cranials, it would be, you would have like this really, I remember this one woman who had done at least one side, because we used to switch it up. Doug would do all of the lineups for the points, who was going to do the points with whom, and he would often do like one person on one side and another person on the other side. So we weren't having one person do, and sometimes too, there would even be different people on the one side. So you would have somebody do the mastoid point, which is done with an elbow, and so anyway, it would be a mixture of people. And often, well, this one that I'm recalling right now, it was the hardest, like I think the hardest points within the cranial are the ones inside the mouth that go up in sort of behind the eyeball, and they're the internal, it's in You know, by that time though, you've gone through, I counted them not long ago when I was contemplating an instructor's doing an instructor's course, and there's about 23, I found 23 necessary points to cover, like pre-cranial. So by that time, people have, you know, a lot of point holding under their belt. They're not jumping into cranial points, that's for sure. So, but this particular cranial, this woman just slid in like butter. Like there was just this opening, and it was probably a combination of both of us, where I was, you know, this willingness was present, and her, you know, it was just a great combination, and she went right in. It took maybe 90 minutes to get all the way up, and it's done so slowly. I mean, you have to do it so slowly that the person basically is facing like new levels of pain each time. You know, each time it just move, like you don't even move. Like basically, you're barely putting any pressure on to make any kind of a move upward, and you have to do that so incredibly slowly and intuitively. And but that time, wow, it was just like 90 minutes, and you know, we were complete, and it was like almost like a bliss experience. And but that was only on one side that I had that experience. The rest of them were kind of like childbirth experiences, where you just reach your maximum capacity of pain and transmute, welcome deeper levels of willingness, you know, just keep transmuting whatever comes up. There's so much in these muscle structures in the jaw. Often people will get, there's a lot of suppressed anger there. So people would, you know, be really like transmuting. And of course, you're not doing it by the point holding techniques of speaking out the word patterns and more of an emoting. You don't dare emote because you have to remain perfectly still. And you know, if you moved at all, the pain, you know, became excruciating, you know, and even more. So it's a real experience of like I see it like an initiatory experience, and like I said, it's an experience that each person has to go through at least once to be put like as part of the instructor's course. And then the criteria to go into the visualization and consciousness course, which is an advanced level for instructors, you have to have at least 2 cranials in order to have the VNC. And looking at that, I mean, that's genius, because, you know, you can get yourself into a cranial once. It's like getting pregnant, you know, you can do it once, but then you have to be really willing to go through it again. Like there has to be this, because you don't know actually what you're getting into. You can read about it, and you can hear people talk about it, but unless you're actually in the experience, that's the teacher. And so the fact that people would be required to have a second means that they are willing to go through that again. And I thought, you know, that was just the genius part of being like the prerequisite to instructors going into the VNC.
Yeah.
Yeah, because doing it once, like, would you be ready and willing to go through a cranial now, Guy?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I've sort of been wanting a second one for a long time.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is Graham? Do you feel like Graham Bennett might be a possibility again, or?
I couldn't tell you. I did actually try to contact him last year, but it just didn't didn't happen.
And
So-
I also say too that cranials, like in you know, when I understand your situation there, that there isn't active point holding groups as of now. I see that changing in the future, but for now, and that's basically because there hasn't been any active instructors. I mean, the two go hand in hand, because you have to have an active instructor to have an active point holding group, at least to get it going. And then the people who continue to run it have to have enough experience to be able to do it, you know, efficiently and correctly. So, but about the cranials, giving and receiving a cranial is really important to the process. So that could be something you look at in your future to, you know, in the future creation of a point holding group, you know, to get people to that level. I mean, it does take time. It takes, you know, a year or two of dedicated effort for people to even get to the point where they can consider working towards cranials. And of course, you have to have, you know, more than two. So, but just to put that out there, that it's really a profound experience to give a cranial. One of my experiences was also with the internal point. I was in somebody's, like, they kind of got stuck, and they were at the, you know, you can get stuck on a certain level of pain, and you have to wait until your willingness to move that energy comes in. Again, much like childbirth. And so this person had gotten stuck at an emotional level. And so I was basically just sitting there. I'm assuming it was in anger, because it was fiery hot. And I was probably sitting there for an hour or two, just in the one spot, waiting for the person to move it forward, because you literally can't move forward. Like, it's not about, for the point holder, there's no way that you can push your way through to the completion of that point. That would be traumatic and detrimental. So you basically just have to be extremely just willing to be there with the person's process. And you know, so I was sitting there waiting, and I literally remember thinking that I was not sure, and this was real to me. It wasn't just, you know, a thought of maybe. I really considered that my finger may be melted, and that when I do remove my finger from that person's head, that I may not have an index finger.
Might be a totally different shape or something. Yeah.
I thought it might have been melted completely away. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a mixture of numbness, so there was a lot of unconsciousness being released, and what I assumed was anger because of the amount of fire. But that person literally got into full burn, like it was a full burn. So they, you know, and they eventually got through it, because one thing about the cranials, and as the other points too, but more so for the cranials than any other points, there's no going back. So once you start, there's, again, like childbirth, once you begin, you have to complete the process. There's no, you know, backing out halfway, because, you know, you can't handle the pain. It's like, okay, you know, but by then, like I said, you're well prepared, and you're well experienced. And even though when we're well experienced, we can often hit these walls, hit these emotional walls, and hit these mental walls where we're just like, whoa, you know, it's like a challenge, you know, to move that energy. But you know, we have the tools, we stick with it, and we just, with that immense willingness, the willingness to grow the willingness. That's really important to remember, and just keep going. So that's a great lesson within the cranial process, is that we're just moving, no matter what what walls we hit or what ceilings we find. We're just going to keep going and keep moving it forward.
So after the cranial, there were a few things that happened in my body. And one was I felt really strongly that I didn't need to drink coffee anymore. Of course, I sort of went back to drinking coffee afterwards, just more justified, but I had a few, maybe a week or a few days where I just felt I don't need it. I think I had some just for pleasure or whatever, I don't know. But that was pretty powerful, because I'd had 10 or 15 years maybe of consistently drinking coffee. Another thing was I used to walk around with headphones on all the time, and after that I didn't want to have that anymore. It just felt like something nasty, something like a disturbance, like I'm sort of ignoring the environment, or I'm denying my surroundings or something. Like it's better to be aware of your environment and so on. Another thing that happened was I used to eat 6 eggs every day. So I was a pretty hard working kind of guy. And one day I cooked up my 6 eggs and I ate a little bit. I used to make a big omelette kind of thing, and I had like one little wedge of the omelette, and then I was full. And I just didn't need to eat so much after it. And fasting was something that had always, I'd heard about it in the early days of BE and so on, but I never did it because I always needed to eat. And then after this, I could appreciate that I had the strength to fast, even though I didn't really know anything about fasting intellectually. I didn't know how to do it or anything. The sort of guidelines how to break a fast and so on.
Sounds like a definite change of consciousness.
Yeah, but I just knew I had the strength to hold the focus and the love and the willingness of not having the sort of physical satisfaction of yummy food all the time. And with that, I think around this time I had another kind of feeling that I should always, not always, but say always, but not phonetically, but should always look sort of straight ahead and hold my head up high. So on the BE videos, there's a bit where Doug and John are talking about how your spine is like an aerial and your head is like the little wobbly bit on top. And when you do this or whatever, you're bending that aerial and distorting the signal. So Doug calls it a transceiver, like your head can transmit and it can receive. So when you tilt your head around, if you walk around like this and you're looking at the floor all the time, you're distorting the ability to transmit and receive. And I guess the shape of the head has the ability to transmit and receive as well. And if we get a donk on the head or something, we get a dent or a musculature deformity or some kind of deformity in the head, that's also going to distort our ability to transmit and receive. And John's pretty wonderful for talking about different facial shapes being, sort of having different characteristics and personality uses and
the personality
skills, stuff like that. Yeah. So that was another real interesting thing. Like I had an experience once where me and a friend were arguing or talking about religion, and he was quite an aggressive kind of person, and I sort of talked about body electronics without really saying, hey, I'm into this thing called body electronics. There were a few times where I wanted to talk to him about it, but I never quite had the guts, and so that sort of led me to talking about it covertly. And anyway, one day I mentioned unconditional love. So when we're on the point holding table, we have, our goal is to completely willingly love whatever horrible whatever pain or numbness or whatever comes up from our psyche, or our subconscious. And anyway, I mentioned this unconditional love once to a friend, and he said, "There's no such thing as unconditional love." You know, and at the time, I sort of just went like this, and I felt kind of ashamed and stupid, and what can, you know, hopeless. Like, explain or whatever. What can you do? And after, you know, after thinking, after sort of seeing, after realizing that we should sort of look straight ahead, I just always felt like I should have my eyes sort of attuned to this kind of level right in front of me, and not be sort of looking down at my feet and so on. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of a couple of other things. One was Mike Tyson's documentary, where he says, you know, at the start of the boxing match, the two boxers would get together and they'd have a stare down and they'd look at each other. And Mike says at the start of this documentary, you know, when I had a stare down with a guy, if I won the stare down, I won the fight. If the other guy was the first to look away, I would win the fight. I thought that was kind of interesting. And maybe around 2018 or so it was, so I had the cranial in 2015, and then a few years later I heard about this guy Jordan Peterson, who told everyone, you know, that did this 12 rules for life book or something. I haven't read it, but I think the first rule is stand up straight with your shoulders back and look forwards, or something like that. And, you know, don't sort of look around like this, that kind of thing. And I think that sort of has a lot to do with confrontation and, you know, facing what's real and just acknowledging what's real. You know, you can't sort of see what's around in your life. I don't know. Anyway,
it feels directly connected to willingness. Yeah,
like the willingness to see what is. Just like on our list, we write down, here's what is, you know, here's my desires and who I really am, sort of thing. Anyway, I was really numb, emotionally numb, and I had a period for maybe 3 months where I was really numb, and it was a numbness that I was not consciously aware of. So if you'd asked me, hey, are you kind of numb or something, I would have said, no, I'm fine, I'm normal. This is, I think, what we call in body electronics being unconsciously unconscious, or something like that, or where you're so unconscious you're not even aware of your unconsciousness. And this was a part of the healing process. Anyway, I can remember a few times where one of my friends was telling me, do this, you know, and he was kind of bossy and rude, and he sort of ordering me around, and I just did it. And, you know, I never thought at the moment, like, why should I do it? You know. Anyway, he left New Zealand, and around the time that he left, I can remember feeling 3 or 4 days after he left, I woke up one day and I was just in I was in a healing crisis, I guess, just because he had left. And I just had this wonderful relief, you know, even though I love him, he's so oppressive and bossy and demanding and everything. And I've always got to be kind of second best in a way. My desires will always take the back seat. And when I want to say something, you know, start saying something and he'll just interrupt like it don't matter. And I just had this beautiful sensation of, oh, I'm so relieved he's gone, you know. Yeah, I mean, I love him and we have some wonderful memories and so on. And, you know, you always have
So do you feel that was a healing crisis, or do you feel that will come into your environment again sometime in your future, to be able to recognize the resistance that was there within you?
Probably. I did not transmute this at a mental level, I don't think. But I definitely became a hell of a lot more intelligent and aware about choice in the moment. Like Graham said to me one day, in every moment there's choice. So there was a time when Graham was talking once, and I sort of interrupted him and he just kept on talking. Like it didn't even matter. It was kind of stepping on his toes, so to speak. And that was kind of interesting because in conversation, people sometimes get a bit excited over getting their ideas out and stuff. And it was just interesting that, thinking my friend could interrupt me partly because I didn't have the complete dedication to saying what I wanted to say. And Graham kind of did have the dedication to saying what he wanted to say. Do I think that's transmuted? No, I don't. I don't think it's entirely transmuted. I think I probably could. In fact, I can look at my life now and see how in some ways I kind of am in the sort of second, no, it's definitely not nowhere near as bad as it was before, but it's.
Well, I'll say here that it's, for the people who are watching this particularly, when a pattern is stimulated within us so that we become aware of it, like what you just described, the greatest thing that we can do, especially if what you said is that the stimuli left, the stimuli for that pattern to make you aware of that pattern, wasn't there anymore. That stimuli is actually an opportunity for our change. So once that left, but then through that experience, you became aware of the pattern. I would say before it's made manifest into your reality again, I would find that pattern within me and really work with that. There's so many layers there to not being heard, to there's layers like the great word pattern of I'm not good enough, or there's so many layers to address within that pattern. So
you never listen.
So that would be that. I call it chosen or forced. And there's an article on my website about that.
Yeah, that's a good article.
Like choosing to transmute the pattern that you become aware of prior to recreating it in your reality. I like the chosen, not forced approach personally. I think worldwide, I see what's happening in 2022 right now as a worldwide healing crisis, and wherever people are at, they're getting stimulated into seeing patterns and programs that we have individually and collectively as we do. So when we see that, when we become aware of that, now would be a good time to work on that.
So anyway, I had this numbness for about 3 months, and then I was angry. I woke up one day really angry with just how my friend had treated me, and it was just insane. It was like if you imagine a beautiful pasture, and then all of a sudden the earth erupts and there's a massive volcano spewing out of it. It was like that. It was just like from this peacefulness, which is unconsciousness, and then just this massive eruption of anger at this guy for all the times he'd bossed me around and been rude to me and just disrespectful and stuff like that. And I think one of the mistakes that I'd made in my life was that I'd sort of been I'd held back, I'd self-censored a bit, so that John Ray's says don't hold your emotions back. Well, I did hold my emotions back, and so of course it's like trying to cork a champagne bottle and then shaking it up, and it's got to explode one day, So
I'm going to clarify that a little bit more. So
okay.
John would say, like, not to suppress the emotion.
Yeah.
And to allow it to come forth within. So there's, just for people that don't know a lot about body electronics, so we don't project our emotion on anything outside of ourselves. So if, if the anger, I don't want people to interpret that we would suggest that the anger be projected onto anybody or anything. But it's just to be, to allow the suppression to come into the awareness. And from that, then we can actually work with that energy. We can work with transmuting that energy. So I'll just remind people of the three energies we're looking for a full transmutation. So we're looking for the emotion, what we've been discussing, and the word pattern that goes with the emotion. There's always a word pattern within it. So the vibratory frequency that creation is brought in, and the memory, or the memory is a representation of the thought pattern. So the memory is an experience of the thought pattern. So we're looking for those three creative components, and we bring that together, and we do what we call as a transmutation, which is encompassing with what I call the three powers, which is forgiveness, love, as unconditional as we can access it, and gratitude. Those are the three powers to apply within those three creative aspects. So it's not like we're feeling that instead of it, we're encompassing it. We're moving the three powers with those three creative energies. And that's what allows for a transmutation to occur.
Okay. Yeah.
The three creative aspects simultaneously is really important. So do you feel complete with that? I think this was a great discussion on sharing with people how the levels are progressive through the body electronics work. So we start off with preparation. So we become nutritionally prepared, ready to do the work. We have to have a certain level of vitality and within the physical body for the rigors, basically, of point holding, and not only to give the point holding, but to actually progress in the regeneration within the body. We need that nutritional preparation. From there, there's many, many, many point holding points. Like I said earlier, we start out with nerve supply and circulation, what we call the STO points, at the base of the occiput, move through the endocrine points, we move through the spinal points, the organ points, then on to, which would be a totally sort of new, in traditionally in body electronics, it would be, cranials would only be given within an instructor's course. And then after that, with the opportunity for more cranials, like I said, you have to have 2 cranials to do the VNC work. And then the visualization and consciousness course. The last one was held by Douglas Morrison, the author of How We Heal, which is the body electronics course book for my intensives, one of them, and still in publication. And Doug gave the VNC in 2005. He held that in Pennsylvania. So those are sort of the basic levels of progression through body electronics, and you become more adept at it as you continue to move through your own internal process, and also learn at the same time the intensity of the evolution of consciousness, and also the movement and willingness it takes to be of true service. When we're first holding points, we're holding the tomorrow, May 1st, we are, I'm going to do some lectures for a point holding group in Ontario. And there's a couple of new people who are joining tomorrow that have never done point holding before. So I'm going to put them, I do the instructing from afar remotely. And because there's 2 people there that have a lot of experience under them, they've been studying body electronics with me for, I think, 18 or maybe 19 years now. And so they're going to be present there to handle the actual correctness of the point holding. And so I'm going to put both of those people holding STO points as their very first experience of point holding. They're going to hold the point, and then from there in the afternoon, they'll have their STO points held. So that's how that's going to go. So that, you know, when we, my point of that is that we gain, we continually gain to increase our capacity to serve. And we do that through the point holding experience. So the STO points are very easy, you know, they're like the easy points to hold. Then the endocrine points get a little bit more difficult. The spinal points get quite a bit more difficult because they're mostly held with the elbow, except for the coccyx point, and some of the cervicals are held with the thumb. But so what I'm saying is it like progressively gets more and more and more difficult, both giving and receiving. And so by the time you get to cranial work, you have progressed to that point where service becomes quite natural. You put your own comfort aside in order to serve the person that is having the points held. So do you feel that's a good place to complete for today?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone for listening. I didn't hear any clicking and clacking on my computer today, so hopefully the audio will be much improved from last week. I did purchase a new mic, so I'm going to have that installed this week. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll upgrade our audio. So, okay, thank you so much, Guy, for doing this, and we'll continue.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, thanks
See
for
you next time.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
thank you for everybody for watching.